Hey to the four of you actually doing this paper, my name is Jordan.
And I'm Mackenzie.
And this is the StudyTime exam strategy guide on level 2 unfamiliar text.
So unfamiliar text at level 2 is about comprehending different language techniques that have been used in a variety of different writings. Now this is basically building on what you did last year at level 1 unfamiliar text for all two of you who did that.
Yeah, and so one of the big things we need to know is that we're not just playing spot the simile. We can't just go through and list out all the times there's a metaphor being used. Level 2 requires even more analysis of the author's purpose and how they were trying to have a particular effect on the reader. So let's get into how to do that. So the first thing you should do after reading the text is to figure out what all the language features are and how you might want to use them in your response. A good way of coming up with how many language features you can use if you're stuck is to think small, medium, and big. So small is like the sentence level language features like similes or metaphors. Medium is kind of like what's in like a stanza or a paragraph. Maybe there's an extended metaphor that runs across a few sentences, or maybe there's a whole stanza of a poem without any punctuation at the end. And big is if you zoom out and look at the whole text. What message is the author conveying throughout the whole thing? How is the narrative structured? Is there like a theme that's kind of interwoven without many paragraphs? This is how you'll know to analyze all aspects of the text.
When you're annotating your text, when you're first reading them, you want to be on the lookout for big ideas. Now, these big ideas might be shown in a few different ways. So if you are feeling a little bit stuck and aren't sure where you really should be going with it, check your question booklet, and that'll usually give you a little bit of an idea about the kinds of things you should be considering. So if we, for example, had a piece about a beach and the author is reminiscing about it, one of the language techniques in it might be the use of past tense throughout to reflect the fact that our author is only remembering. So a big idea that might stem off this is reflection. Now it's important to remember that you can have multiple different big ideas within one text. And so what you can do is, after you're annotating, look at the list of big ideas that have kind of occurred to you throughout, and then deciding which one you think would be easiest to discuss or you have the most evidence on.
Okay, so at level 2, unlike level 1, the exam doesn't give you multiple questions about achieved merit excellence. It's all structured into one kind of like mini essay. So like an essay, you should have about 2 to 3 paragraphs, each with 1, 2, or 3 language features within them. And ideally you want to link them together. However, in order to show the marker that you have a clear point, you want to start off your essay with a thesis and also have a topic sentence with each paragraph. And ideally at the end, explain how it all fits together to come up with your interpretation of the big analysis of the text.
So how do we actually create and execute an appropriate structure? Let's take an example to analyze how an author wants us to understand how people cope with flood. So we take 2 or 3 big ideas that we located in the text and we make different theses out of these. So the first one might be people cope with a flood by reflection, by use of past tense. And another thing might be that people cope with a flood by optimism, and you found other examples in your text that help show this. The rest of your answer is going to just basically be proving what the points that you're trying to make. And you might be using the peel structure, you might use the sexy structure. It doesn't really matter as long as you have a statement, an example, an explanation, and a summary or analysis as to why it's important and how it helps you answer the question.
So in order to get excellence, you need to be showing that you have understood how the author has used a variety of language features for an overall purpose. So instead of saying, this simile does this, or this metaphor does this, you're saying the combination of language features used by the author has had this overall effect on the reader. And this is how you show the marker that you're understanding the text at a deeper level, and you're also understanding all the complexity of the writer's craft. So a good way of doing this is by merging the effects of language features together. So maybe the metaphors kind of build up this idea in the reader's head, and this is also kind of reinforced in the mood. And this all comes together to show how the reader has got this new idea from the theme, and they've got a mood with all the connotations, that kind of yarny deep stuff.
One of the easiest ways to go from achieved merit is doing more than just identifying the language features within the text. You're actually explaining the effect and what it's supposed to be doing. So say for example you have personification. It does more than just apply human tendencies to an inanimate object. So you could say something like, the author uses personification to make the tornado feel as though it was actually chasing us, as opposed to the author just thought it was a nice thing to put in there. So to sum up guys, unfamiliar text at level 2 requires that you use the language features that you identify throughout and show how it contributes to the big ideas that the author is trying to convey in their text.
Yeah, and to show a perceptive understanding, writing needs to be answering 2 points. What was the author's purpose in writing about what they were and the language feature, and what effect does it have on the audience?
So in your own study for this, we recommend checking out some of the StudyTime resources that we have on this. We've got articles on how to write a killer essay and how to tailor what you're writing for the unfamiliar text standard.
Yeah, and although NCEA does not publish the actual unfamiliar text from past years, you can still look at the exemplars and assessment reports to figure out what the markers want and how people got excellence. You can also just analyze an Ariana Grande song.
Either or.